Somewhere, tens of thousands of years ago, a teenage girl looked down and saw blood. No one had warned her. No one had explained it. There was no one to call, no book to check, nothing. And here's the strange part. This exact moment happened to essentially every woman who has ever lived. It might be one of the single most universal experiences in the entire human story, and one of the least discussed, barely a footnote in most history books. So let's actually talk about it. First, a quick biology detour, because it explains almost everything else that follows. Puberty isn't simply growing up. From an evolutionary standpoint, your body is constantly running a background calculation. Do I currently have enough resources to support a pregnancy? Researcher Rose Frisch proposed in the 1970s that a girl's body needs to cross a minimum threshold of body fat, somewhere around 17%, before menstruation can even start. Later, research refined those exact numbers and debated some of the details, but the core idea has held up remarkably well. Puberty isn't really about age. It's about energy. Your body checks its own fuel gauge before it decides reproduction is even worth attempting. Which raises an interesting question. If it really is about energy, when did puberty actually arrive for a prehistoric teenager? Later than most people would guess. In well-fed modern populations, the average age of a first period sits around 12 or 13. But anthropologist Nancy Howell, studying the Kalahari's Kung, a hunter-gatherer society still living a traditional lifestyle, found menarche happening much later, closer to 16. Harder physical labor, leaner diets, and the sheer energy cost of daily survival all pushed that threshold back. It's a reasonable, evidence-based assumption that prehistoric girls followed a similar pattern. Later, not earlier than what counts as normal today. Now picture that 16-year-old somewhere deep in prehistory, experiencing this for the first time. Here's where honesty matters. We genuinely don't know what she thought. Nobody wrote it down. There's no journal entry, no cave painting captioned "Day 1, extremely confused." Anyone who claims to know her exact reaction is simply guessing. What we can do is look at more recent traditional societies, still outside industrial culture, where anthropologists actually recorded how menarche was handled. And across many unrelated cultures, one pattern shows up again and again. A first period isn't hidden, it's marked. Sometimes with seclusion, sometimes with ceremony, sometimes with outright celebration, but almost always treated as significant, not as a secret, not as something shameful. Whether prehistoric humans handled it exactly the same way, we can't say for certain. But it strongly suggests something worth sitting with. Treating periods as an unspeakable secret looks a lot more like a modern habit than a universal human one. Here's the frustrating part for archaeologists trying to piece this together. And the reason is refreshingly unglamorous. Whatever prehistoric women actually used to manage their periods, plant material, soft hides, anything absorbent, was organic. And organic material rots. It doesn't fossilize. It doesn't survive thousands of years buried in soil. It doesn't turn up neatly labeled at a dig site. So, if you've ever seen a confident viral claim about exactly what cave women used, that confidence isn't coming from a preserved artifact, because there isn't one. What we actually have are hypotheses, built reasonably from the materials people are known to have used for other everyday purposes. Things like moss, soft plant fibers, and prepared animal hides, all of which were already part of daily life for wound care and general use. It's a logical inference that the same materials got used here too. Logical isn't the same as proven, though, and any honest historian will tell you the direct evidence simply hasn't survived. Once we reach actual written history, the picture sharpens dramatically, because now people were finally putting things down on paper, or papyrus. The oldest known women's health document is the Kahun Gynecological Papyrus from ancient Egypt, dating to roughly 1800 BCE. It directly addresses menstrual issues alongside pregnancy and contraception. A few centuries later came the Ebers Papyrus, around 1550 BCE, which references irregular versus regular bleeding as something physicians were expected to actually track. In other words, Egyptian medicine already treated menstruation as legitimate medical territory, worth an entire scroll, 3,500 years ago. The Greeks and Romans pushed it even further. A physician named Cyrannus of Ephesus, writing around the 1st or 2nd century CE, produced a detailed 4-volume text simply titled Gynecology, covering menstruation, anatomy, contraception, and childbirth in careful, methodical detail. He even recommended rest during particularly difficult periods, advice that, honestly, still sounds pretty reasonable today. So there's real, detailed medical writing on this subject, stretching back thousands of years. And yet actual physical menstrual products from antiquity are still almost entirely absent from the archaeological record. For the exact same reason as before, cloth and plant fiber simply don't survive that long. Ancient writers occasionally mention absorbent materials in passing, but modern historians stay cautious about how much weight to put on those references, since the solid physical evidence backing them up is thin. Trace most of the viral fun facts about ancient period products back to their actual source, and that source turns out to be shakier than the confident retelling suggests. Which brings us to a genuinely wild closing fact. The convenient products treated as completely unremarkable today are shockingly recent inventions. The very first commercially sold pad, called Lister's Towels, launched around 1896, and it flopped. Victorian-era society considered the whole subject too shameful to even advertise, let alone discuss openly in a store. It actually took nurses during World War, noticing that leftover wound dressing material absorbed blood far better than cloth, to accidentally kickstart the entire sanitary pad industry. The tampon with a modern applicator wasn't even patented until 1931 by Dr. Earl Haas, and didn't reach store shelves as Tampax until the mid-1930s. Let that sit for a second. Humans have been menstruating for the entire existence of our species, hundreds of thousands of years. And the modern products treated today as completely ordinary, barely worth a second thought, are barely a century old. For nearly all of human history, women simply figured it out themselves, generation after generation, using whatever was actually on hand, with essentially no instructions, no products, and for most of that history, almost total silence surrounding the whole subject. Which, honestly, makes it one of the quietest, most consistently overlooked threads running through the entire story of being human.